This morning, a 15th century Gothic church started on fire. The organ inside the church was completely destroyed. And according to one individual on Twitter, it is one of the last, if not the last, pre-French Revolution organs. See, this is occurring in Nantes, France, and we've heard repeatedly over the past year that churches across France were being desecrated, burned, and destroyed. A lot of people have conspiracy theories, I guess you can call it, as to who's starting these fires and why they're starting. Of course, we often hear from the press that the fires are just accidents. Well, I'm not so sure. You see, here, an arson probe is being launched because 3 fires were started. It would seem that this arson in France was intentional. In the United States, we heard a story of a man crashing a vehicle into the foyer of a church and then trying to set it on fire with people inside. On an Alaskan Airlines flight, a man got up and threatened to kill every passenger unless they accepted that Jesus Christ was a black man. We have seen statues of Jesus Christ beheaded, statues of the Virgin Mary destroyed. And it's not just about religion. See, I'm not a religious person. I did grow up Catholic for a brief period and then ultimately just non-theistic, I would say. But I am greatly concerned about the destruction of our culture and our history. Statues are being torn down across the U.S. Violent riots are erupting, and they're tearing down things as nonsensical as elk statues in Portland. That, to me, is what I see from all of this. Now, look, I understand there's going to be a lot of religious people who are affected on a deeply personal and faith-based level when they see that someone tried to burn down a 15th century Gothic church. For me, I look at it as very important bits of history. You see, everything we have, everything we know, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. Now, we can look back in time, and for someone like me who's rather, I don't necessarily want to say agnostic, but non-theistic, I don't look at these churches and think that they represent the great scientific values of today. But I do look back at these churches, I should say I do look at these churches now, and recognize the advancements in architecture, for instance, just the general cultural developments that lifted us up to be better, to build a better world. You see, a lot of people might not know this, but our current legal system, English common law, the presumption of innocence is actually rooted in the Bible. I believe in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The general idea is you can't condemn an innocent person. That it lends itself to Blackstone's formulation. It is better that 10 guilty persons escape than 1 innocent person suffer, which ultimately leads us to the 5th Amendment, the right to due process, the right to remain silent, and the presumption of innocence. So while I may not be religious, I understand the importance of these symbols and what they represent. Be it a statue, be it a church. You see, I'm no fan of the Confederate statues, but even those, I believe, deserve to be carefully placed in museums so we can recognize what came before us, the things we've narrowly missed, the horrifying routes we may have gone down, and how we've actually come to do better. You see, it would seem that, the good guys tend to win. I'll tell you what's worrying to me with these stories, and then I'll read through it and we'll talk about what's going on. It's not just this one church, but churches across Europe are apparently being burned down. Churches in the U.S. are now being attacked following high-profile activists, notably Shaun King, saying, "Tear down the statues of Jesus." Christopher Columbus, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. I can talk about these statues being torn down over and over and over again. But people really don't understand ideas, philosophies. They don't just exist. Someone thought them up. They developed these ideas. We need them and we can forget them, and that's dangerous. These revolutionaries who would tear down statues and destroy our history, the ISIS members in the Middle East who are destroying ancient historical sites, they're doing it because they don't want you to know that these people crafted ideas. They've created systems. And from those systems, we have created better and better ideas. We've refined them and improved upon them. If they can go back to the source and cut off the root, then they can truly erase the ideas of freedom, liberty, the presumption of innocence. And more than that, it's about our culture. You see, a lot of people really don't realize this, man, that even in the U.S., for people who are not religious, so much of our understanding of the world is rooted in Christianity and Judaism. And they would seek to destroy it so they can change our perception of the world. At the same time, we are seeing other Eastern powers, notably China, start gaining power, and they're rising. And this is where it gets really scary. It's Thucydides' trap, which I mentioned over and over again, that when a rising power is on the verge of displacing the dominant power, war breaks out. It's not just about our economies. It's about our culture. It's about our history. It's about our legacy. It's about the things that made us who we are being destroyed at a time when a rival economic power is rising up. But enough of that. Let's actually read. I'll give you the news, and we'll talk about what's going on here. And I've got some other news pertaining to these churches, as well as violence erupting over statues. But let's talk about Nantes. The Daily Mail says arson probe launched over Inferno at Nantes Cathedral after blaze was sparked near organ inside 1434 Gothic church. They say police have launched an arson investigation after an inferno broke out at Nantes Cathedral this morning, which took 104 firefighters to control. Smoke was seen billowing out of the 15th century structure in France as emergency services desperately tried to extinguish the inferno, which is believed to have started at the cathedral's organ. Prosecutor Pierre Senes said 3 fires had been started at the site and authorities were treating the incident as a criminal act. He gave no other details. Here's a photo of the fire at the cathedral. The blaze comes just over a year after a major fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, which destroyed its roof and main spire. Local fire chief Laurent Ferlet told reporters 104 firemen were still at the site to ensure the blaze was completely under control. The fire had broken out behind the grand organ, which was completely destroyed, he said. Stained glass windows at the front of the cathedral were blown out. However, the damage was not as bad as initially feared. It is part of our history, a part of our heritage, Nantes Mayor Johanna Rowland said. We all have these images in mind, the story in our hearts, but at this stage, the situation does not seem to be comparable to that of 1972. French Prime Minister Jean Castex, however you pronounce it, and French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin will be among officials who go to Nantes Saturday afternoon in reaction to the blaze. I want to show you a photo of inside. Peter Anthony says the last major pre-revolution organ constructed in France is now completely destroyed. This breaks my heart, man. History. Everything that led up to where we are today and all its imperfections, but the things that survive, that remind us of what things used to be like, that give you proof that it really happened, destroyed. I often think about my past and you wonder, did it really happen? Have you ever had this philosophical, thought process where you wonder, how do we know what reality really is? How do we know that we really exist? We do, because we have evidence to prove it. There are a lot of sci-fi films and movies where a person has memories, but it turns out they're a clone. It never really happened. I was watching a show recently where it was a sci-fi show. A guy clones his wife, and then his new clone of his wife doesn't realize she's a clone. She refuses to believe it. And he says, check your scar, because a clone wouldn't have a scar. And lo and behold, she didn't, proving that her memories were false. This is the importance of physical evidence of our history. When someone says, we did this happened, this existed, we can look to the paintings. We can look to the buildings and the structures and the stories left behind. And while they can be corrupted over time, this is the importance of statues, of history, of monuments. It gives proof that we actually existed in this way. If they destroy all of these statues, if they destroy these organs, these churches, and someone comes to you and says, this is what happened, how would you know it really happened? You take a look at what's going on with the 1619 Project. They say the United States was founded as a slaveocracy. The real foundation of this country, 1619, when the first slaves were brought to the U.S. Well, that's just not true. I mean, the colonies were all sovereign colonies and technically sovereign unto themselves after the Revolution. Some didn't necessarily want to join. There was I was reading once that maybe Quebec would have joined because they were part of the British Empire as well. Ultimately, they didn't. But we know that things happened. We know what really happened in our history so long as we preserve that history. But they would seek to rewrite it. The challenge is that we have proof. We have statues. We have documents. We have letters. We have books. We have writings. We have evidence. The founding fathers created this nation on a specific date. And we know what they really thought about slavery. Many did not like it, and a couple didn't even have slaves. Not perfect. Absolutely not. But we know, to the best of our understanding, we probably get a lot wrong because history is very imperfect. But we keep this evidence to try and preserve our understanding of what, why, and how it happened. Now they're destroying that. They're destroying our history. And for whatever reason, churches across Europe are being desecrated. One of the responses to this Twitter thread about the destruction of this organ is why would someone want to burn down a church? It's an attack on our cultural institutions. I know that a lot of people seem to have a theory as to who's really burning these buildings down. I don't know. I'll tell you this, though. Sean King, a leftist activist, said tear down statues of Jesus. And then someone literally tore down a statue of Jesus and beheaded the statue. A man got on a plane and threatened passengers, saying that he would kill all of them unless they accepted that Jesus Christ was black. I can't tell you who actually is doing it. We'll wait for the investigation to figure it out. But I wouldn't be surprised if it is far left groups that want a cultural revolution because they're trying to destroy our history. Catholic churches burned, vandalized over a weekend as police investigate. Where's the outrage? Florida and California churches set on fire as authorities question if it is connected to recent protests. You know what, man? I don't know for sure. I don't know what it's connected to, but I do know that, there's attempts to topple statues in Chicago. We have the story from the Chicago Tribune. Attempt to topple Christopher Columbus statue in Chicago's Grant Park prompts standoff with police, arrests, and rebuke of mayor. There are groups that would want to destroy our history. In Philadelphia, a bunch of men showed up to defend the statue of Christopher Columbus. I believe it was mostly like Italian groups because Christopher Columbus is, a symbol of Italian history, I guess. And he's an icon to the Italian community. And many of these people showed up with masks and bats, some with guns, and they staved off the far left. They won. And then the city said, we're taking it down anyway because, the potential for violence is too much. We'll just remove it. The city of Columbus, Ohio, literally named for Christopher Columbus, took down their giant Columbus statue because it was offensive. I'm sorry, man. A lot of people don't want to hear it, but it really sounds like the revolution is winning, baby. Come on. Burning down churches, attacking churches, tearing down statues of Jesus Christ. I remember when we started hearing about these statues being torn down, and I said, we'll probably see some violence. Sure enough, in certain areas we did. Like I mentioned in Philly, these guys showed up and said, don't you dare. In New Mexico, some dude showed up. They chased him, attacked him, and then he ended up firing on a guy and critically injuring him. I don't know exactly. I don't know what the latest development in that story is. I believe that man was released. I'm not entirely sure. But people have started to try and defend some of it. But I was worried if they started tearing down Jesus and Mary, you would see a reaction like no other. I guess I was wrong. There are some photos going around where you can see some like armed dudes defending a statue of Jesus on the cross outside of a church saying, Catholic men will defend this. But maybe there really aren't Christians left in this country. Now, hear me out. I understand a lot of our values are based in Christianity. Whether you're Christian or not, it's true. The idea of sin, for instance, I was thinking about this. Like, even though many people are not Christian, they understand these concepts. They understand a lot of concepts in Christianity that you might not find if you went to, say, Tibet or China, Taiwan, Japan. You might explain these basic principles to people and they might be like, I don't understand those concepts. Because it is part of our culture and our heritage, even if we are not religious. I mean, look at the fact that we celebrate Christmas or that we celebrate Hanukkah. Now, of course, many other people celebrate other holidays, but Christmas for the longest time was an important part of our culture. We have Christmas specials, the Star Wars Christmas special. These are parts of our history, whether or not we agree or believe in the religions. It's all starting to go away. I know a lot of people say they are Christian. There was a Pew Research study, I think it was from last year, that found 65% of this country identifies as Christian. And that number's actually been going down. I think it was, like a decade or two before, it was something like 90%. It was a lot more people. Now, not so much. Now around 65%. Again, I'm not overly religious, but when I see that they desecrated a statue of Jesus and there's no rioting, there's no protest, there's no, overt outrage, then maybe there aren't really Christians left. I guess I should clarify that in the sense that, could you imagine, the amount of rage you get when certain historical religious figures have their picture drawn? The rage you see from that. Or what about the attacks in New York? Literal physical assault on the Jewish community. No riots. There was a lot of outrage. There was protesting. No riots. I wonder to what degree someone would need to be devout to actually get up and say, this has gone too far. You're attacking what I believe in, my faith, my eternity. Nobody does. And I think about the people who keep saying that they won't stand up for fear of their children. I'm like, wow, is there nothing more important than the future for your children? You refuse today to stand up. Why? So that your children can bow and live subjugated? It makes no sense to me. But that's why I'm saying, hey, man, sounds like the revolution is winning. We're on day 50 of the riots in Portland. They're now weaponizing the images of the federal officers trying to defend the courthouse against Trump and the DHS. And the polls and everything are saying Trump is losing. And I know a lot of people are saying the polls are probably wrong because they lie, and that may be. But regardless, what we're seeing in the streets with these rioters getting away with it, what we're seeing with the rampant destruction of churches and religious symbols, whether it was arson or something else, the culture is being erased. I wonder why. Maybe it is, some people believe, to prevent Thucydides' trap, to prevent a war with China, to destroy the cultural icons of Europe and the United States so that people feel detached and don't really care when all this is destroyed. Maybe that's why so many people, don't stand up and won't defend themselves. Could it be that there are many people, could it be that the culture war was lost a long time ago? I saw that story and I brought it up, that in the federal government, there's documents about anti-whiteness, anti-racism and all these things, how white culture is racist. The Smithsonian puts that up. These documents from 1990. So I wonder if we actually saw the demise of our culture a long time ago, but as these different groups who held these ideologies spread throughout the government, through our schools, into our industries like Hollywood, they didn't come out until they had critical mass, and then now they've announced it, and now it's too late to actually stop it. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We're now seeing some people in media actually start calling out the woke far left. New York Mag's Jonathan Chait wrote that these, anti-racism trainers are just peddling in white supremacy. Maybe the only reason it's becoming prominent is because the Democratic Party desperately needs it so they can defeat Trump. But the destruction of the churches in Europe, or at least this arson now, has nothing to do with the U.S. election. I don't know what it is. But we are, whether it's intentional or not, whether you think it's a conspiracy, I don't think we should even bother talking about, I don't see reason to entertain, these ideas, because a lot of people have these ideas. I'm going to tell you one thing. You can figure out who's starting it, fine. But what I'm talking about is something different. I'm talking about our history, our heritage, and our culture all being destroyed. Now, of course, look, man, I have a family history that is broken. It's, it's not the same as a traditional American history because of, the mom's side of my mom's family, my mom's side, having fled Korea because of, for a lot of reasons. So my worldview is particularly different, but America is mostly what I know. And it's the great melting pot. There's a lot of institutions for freedom, liberty that allow people to succeed. And I've learned that firsthand. It's being erased. What's being put in its place? Intersectionalism, some kind of weird communist, far left, socialist ideas, policies. The Democratic Party seems to just say whatever they need to say to get elected. It seems like they ultimately don't really care what's going on. Most people in this country are passive and not paying attention. And then you can see the media playing their games to just try and go after Trump for no reason. And the dominoes are set up. It doesn't need to be intentional. We have become culturally fractured and weak. We have no unifying idea we wake up to and cheer for. It used to be the American flag, I suppose. But now you have people desecrating it, burning it, kneeling before it, whatever. And whether, protesting that matters or not, I'll put it this way. When Colin Kaepernick kneeled for the national anthem, a lot of people got mad saying he was disrespecting the flag. Well, he certainly won that argument, and now everybody's kneeling, almost everybody. To me, it didn't matter so much that he kneeled for the flag. What mattered is that we could see within our own culture a fracturing, support for the flag, for, the boys in blue, for the military. All of these ideas are waning, on the decline. And on the rise, a chaotic, destructive force, cancel culture, the destruction of monuments and statues, the insult to our history, the lies, the deception, the revisionism. Yeah, it's all falling apart. We don't actually know what the truth is anymore. And I'll tell you what, this is probably why China is so authoritarian when it comes to the internet. They don't want a fractured culture. They want a unified culture. And they want everyone to do as they're told, which is why they're cracking down on Hong Kong hard, and they don't like free speech. They don't want anybody to challenge their history, and they won't, because they will come and they will lock you up. In the US, however, a combination of our liberties and the internet has resulted in a fractured view of what we really are, should be, and have always been. And now with the New York Times being essentially infiltrated by this cult of intersectionalism, they're literally rewriting history before our eyes. As statues get ripped from their base, people like Frederick Douglass, his statue is torn down and thrown by a river. We don't know who did it, but I think we can make assumptions. And churches being destroyed. And when those churches are destroyed, nobody stands up to defend them. I say nobody. Obviously, some people do. Nobody in our society. So I'm going to tell you right now, man. This may be the last stand for what, America is. But if somebody gets brutalized by the police and we end up with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people protesting, and every local, every major city government changing street names and painting murals, you can see where our culture has already gone to. And when a church like this famous, 15th century church is someone starts 3 fires and destroys it, and no one gets up and yells about it, there's no strong culture behind these ideas. When people tore down a statue of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and nobody stood up and screamed about it, look, I know people did. I'm speaking relatively. We didn't see widespread riots or anger. We didn't see much of anything. We know where our culture is. We finally did see a large Blue Lives Matter and defend the police protests emerging around the U.S., not just one, but many. And the media didn't cover it. And that's one of the big issues. If you can't see it, it's not there, I suppose. So does the silent majority matter? I would say sure, but we'll see how they vote. And if no one knows they exist, they may just vote for who they think is going to be the winner, I guess. I don't know. Churches being destroyed, statues being destroyed. Our history is being erased before our very eyes. The New York Times historical revisionism. This is the track we're on. Will it be reversed? I have no idea. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net. So stick around. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.